When the world sleeps and the streets fall silent, something else awakens. These are not just ghost stories. These are real encounters, chilling moments of terror that unfolded under the cover of darkness. From ominous knocks beneath the floor to strangers lurking in the shadows, these tales prove that sometimes the night hides more than just our fears. It reveals them. Prepare yourself for 4 creepy true horror stories that happened late at night. And remember, not everything that knocks wants to be let in. The Man in the Basement. It was a Monday night, a night that should have been ordinary, just like the dozens before it. I had finished my shift at 8 p.m. and headed straight home. Gaming with my friends online had become my nightly routine ever since my divorce a few months back. The house was far too quiet and too empty otherwise. In a way, those chaotic, laughter-filled sessions over Discord kept me sane. Outside, the weather had been turning all evening. A thunderstorm was forecasted, along with flash flood warnings. Those were so common around here that nobody really took them seriously anymore. I settled into my gaming chair, headset on, ready for another night of distraction. By around 11 p.m., in the middle of a match, a massive gust of wind slammed against my window, shaking the entire house violently. Startled, I pulled one side of my headset off. The sound of rain hammering against the walls filled my ears, and the old wooden frame of the house groaned under the force of the storm. I turned back to the screen to comment on the craziness, but just as I opened my mouth, the screen flickered, and everything went black. For half a second, the lights and power cut out completely, then flickered back. My Discord call was still connected. I could hear my friends. But before I could say anything, everything snapped off again, this time for good. The house was plunged into pitch darkness. Couldn't even see my hands in front of my face. Cursing under my breath, I fumbled for my phone on the desk, turned on the flashlight, and stood up. I tried flipping the wall switches. No luck. Annoyed, I made my way carefully downstairs, planning to check the street and see if anyone else had lost power. I pressed my face against the front window, but with the rain pounding so heavily, it was nearly impossible to tell. The houses across the street looked dark, but it was late. Most people would be asleep anyway. I sent a quick text to the group chat telling them I was out for the night, then decided to grab the old portable battery pack I kept in the basement. Reluctantly, I descended into the basement, a cramped, low-ceilinged place full of dusty boxes and forgotten junk. As I was digging around for the battery pack, I thought I heard something. A soft shuffling noise, coming from somewhere deeper in the darkness. I froze, heart pounding in my ears. But then the wind howled through the cracks again, and I shook my head. It's just the storm, I told myself. I grabbed the battery, hurried back upstairs, and plugged in a small lamp. A faint, warm glow filled the living room. Not much, but better than total darkness. Still uneasy, I sat on the couch and opened YouTube on my phone, scrolling mindlessly, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling of unease. Almost an hour passed. Restless, I decided to step outside for a moment. The overhang above the porch shielded me from the worst of the rain. Through the sheets of water, I could see that a few houses across the street still had lights on. My stomach twisted. Why only my house? If there had been a massive outage, surely more houses would be dark. As if on cue, I received a text. It was from an unknown number. Power outages reported in your area due to downed lines. Stay indoors. Help is on the way. No company name, no official sender ID. Cold knot formed in my gut. Still trying to rationalize it, I went back inside. Maybe they just hadn't labeled the text. Maybe it was automated. I sat back down and kept half an eye on the storm through the window. That's when I heard it. A creak, a familiar sound, the unmistakable groan of a footstep on old wooden stairs, the stairs leading up from my basement. I muted my phone and strained my ears. Another step. I rose slowly, heart hammering against my ribs. I edged toward the hallway, my phone light barely cutting through the heavy darkness. When I turned the corner, my blood ran cold. The basement door was wide open. I stared at it, trying to convince myself I had simply forgotten to close it. But deep down, I knew better. Slowly I approached, shining my light down the staircase. I saw nothing but inky blackness. No way in hell was I going down there. I reached out with a shaking hand and shut the door, pressing it firmly closed. I hadn't even had time to process what was happening when... Boom! The door shuddered violently as something slammed against it from the other side. I yelped and instinctively threw my body weight against the door. Someone was pounding against it, over and over, trying to break through. There was no lock, just a flimsy handle. Desperately, I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. The moment the call started ringing, pounding stopped. I pressed my ear against the door. I could hear footsteps retreating down the stairs. Without hesitating, I bolted. I grabbed my keys, threw open the front door, and sprinted out into the rain, heart slamming against my chest. I got in my car, reversed across the street, and parked facing my house, headlights off. I watched and waited. 10 minutes later, 3 police cruisers pulled up. Officers entered my home cautiously. When they came out, their faces were grim. There was no one inside. But they confirmed the back door had been unlocked, leading out into the woods behind the neighborhood. Even worse, they investigated the power outage. There had been no reports of downed lines, no outage in the area. Whoever had broken into my house had manually cut my power, sent a fake text to keep me calm, and waited, hidden, in my basement, hoping I would come down. They knew my phone number. They knew my routines. They had planned this. To this day, I don't know who it was, or what would have happened if I had gone down those stairs. All I know is, after that night, I never truly felt safe in my own home again. The knocking underneath. When I first moved into my small basement-level apartment, it felt like a fresh start. I was 25, starting a new job in a city 2 hours away from where I grew up. The building was old, creaky, and tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where people kept their heads down and their curtains drawn. Rent was cheap, and honestly, I didn't mind the occasional groaning of the old pipes or the creaking floors. I told myself, it's just an old building, you'll get used to it. For the first few weeks, everything was normal. I'd come home from work, heat up some leftovers, and spend the night scrolling through my phone or watching movies. Nights were uneventful, quiet except for the usual background hum of a city winding down. But that changed one night. It was late, just after 2 a.m., when I heard it for the first time. 3 soft knocks, not on my door, not on the walls. From the floor, directly underneath me. I sat up straight on the couch, phone slipping from my hands. I stared at the hardwood floor, heart thudding in my chest. Maybe it was the pipes. Maybe an animal got into the walls. But then, a moment later, knock, knock, knock. Deliberate, measured, human. I stood up slowly, every instinct in my body telling me not to move. The knocks stopped. Silence swallowed the room. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I tried to laugh it off. Old building. Probably just something shifting, right? But I couldn't ignore the door. The entrance to the basement was located in the far corner of my tiny kitchen. A trapdoor bolted shut, blending almost seamlessly into the floor. When I first moved in, the landlord told me the basement was sealed off and unsafe, insisting there was no need for me to ever go down there. Just an old storage area, he had said. Still, that day, I checked the bolts. They were intact, tightly screwed in place. I told myself to forget about it. For a few nights, nothing happened. Then, a week later, it started again. I was reading on the couch around midnight when I heard the knocks. Not underneath me this time, but on the basement door itself. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. The knocks were louder now, more urgent. I turned off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness, and waited, holding my breath, straining to listen. After a few minutes, silence returned. But the feeling didn't leave. The air felt thicker, like the room itself was holding its breath too. A few days later, things escalated. Around 1 a.m., I was woken up by a sound so loud it jolted me upright. The trapdoor rattling violently. It shook in its frame, as if someone below was slamming against it with their fists, trying to break it open. I didn't even think. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911, but there was no signal. Just an empty bar. I stood in the middle of my bedroom, heart racing, staring at the closed kitchen door, behind which the basement hatch lay hidden. The rattling stopped. Silence. Then, a faint, dragging sound. Something scraping along the underside of the floor, moving from the kitchen toward the living room. I backed away, pressing myself into the corner of the bedroom, clutching my phone like a weapon. It went on for what felt like forever. The slow, deliberate sound of something moving just inches beneath my feet. Finally, it stopped. I didn't sleep that night. I barely dared to move until dawn broke. The next day, I confronted the landlord. I demanded to know what the hell was going on in the basement. He looked uncomfortable, pale even. After a long silence, he muttered something about the building having a history, about it once being a boarding house decades ago. Something bad had happened, he said. Something that made them seal off the basement permanently. When I pressed for more details, he refused to say anything else. I should have packed up and left right then. But rent was cheap, and I told myself, it's just stories, superstition. I tried to ignore it. I tried to live my life. Then came the worst night. It was storming outside, rain lashing against the windows, thunder rumbling low across the sky. I was lying in bed, trying to read, when the trapdoor slammed open. The sound echoed through the tiny apartment like a gunshot. I froze. The kitchen door creaked open slowly, inch by inch. I could hear wet, dragging footsteps moving across the floor. Closer. Closer. The bedroom door creaked. Through the faint crack, I saw a hand, pale, bony, fingers too long, curling around the edge of the door. I didn't think. I bolted from the bed, threw open the window, and jumped into the storm outside, landing hard in the wet grass. Scrambling to my feet, I sprinted into the street, not daring to look back. Later, when I returned with the police, the apartment was empty. The trapdoor was wide open. The officers searched the basement but found nothing. Just a maze of old, crumbling rooms filled with mildew and rot. But in one corner, they found something that made my blood run cold. A pile of small, makeshift bedding, torn clothes, and a wall covered in scratch marks. As if someone, or something, had been living down there, clawing at the walls for years. They never found anyone. I moved out that same week, breaking the lease without a second thought. Even now, months later, I can still hear it sometimes. In the dead of night, when the world is silent. Knock, knock, knock. From somewhere deep beneath the floorboards, still waiting.